The path begins beneath your feet. You take a breath. It moves in, then out, soft as the tide withdrawing from the shore. The earth is cool under you. The morning air tastes clean. A faint mist clings to the bamboo leaves, trembling as if afraid to fall. You hear only the low hum of insects and the occasional creak of wood from the temple behind you. This is where walking meditation begins, not in motion, but in awareness. You stand still. Your soles feel the earth, solid, ancient, patient. The world waits for no command. You simply belong to it. In Zen, we call this Sampo, walking with the mind of release. You do not walk to arrive somewhere. You walk to remember that you are already home. The teacher Ryokan once said, "When I walk, I walk. When I eat, I eat. When I sleep, I sleep." It sounds simple, yet this simplicity is the summit of all practice. It means your whole being rests in what is. Nothing extra, no resistance, no control. You might think release means losing something, as though letting go will make you less. But in truth, what you release are the illusions that keep you bound. You release the need to be perfect, the endless measuring, the grasping for certainty. You release the idea that peace must be earned. When you walk with release, you do not lead the earth. You let the earth lead you. Each step becomes an act of surrender, a bow to the ever-changing flow. Listen closely now. The wind in the bamboo isn't hurrying. The leaves rustle because they yield. That is the way of Zen. As you take your first step, feel the heel touch the ground, then the arch, then the toes. Your mind might wander. That's all right. Notice it as you would notice a drifting cloud. No judgment, no resistance. Just come back to the step, the rhythm, the quiet pulse of life beneath your feet. The Buddha once taught, mindfulness of the body leads to mindfulness of the world. When you know your breath, your skin, your muscles, you begin to sense the breathing of the forest, the pulse of the soil. Walking meditation is not isolation, it is union. You walk not alone, but with every tree, every stone, every small being unseen beneath the grass. This is how compassion is born, not from grand emotion, but from direct intimacy with the living moment. The temple bell rings in the distance. Its sound moves through the valley, deep and low, then fades. You stand still again. The bell leaves behind silence, but this silence isn't empty. It's full of the echo of all things that came before and all things yet to come. Impermanence is not sorrowful when you understand it. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat disappears. Yes, but it disappears into something vast. To release means to trust that vastness. You cannot hold the wind, yet the wind touches you. You cannot trap the moment, yet the moment shapes you. So you walk and you breathe. You let the world pass through you like water through reeds. When the mind releases control, the heart remembers its natural pace. In the monastery, morning practice begins before sunrise. Monks move silently through corridors lit only by oil lamps. Bare feet whisper on the wooden floors. Each step is deliberate. No one rushes. There is work to do, cleaning, sweeping, cooking, but all is done within stillness. A young novice once asked his teacher, "Master, when do we meditate?" The master smiled and answered, "When we walk to fetch water, when we bow, when we close our eyes." Meditation is not what you do, it's what you stop fighting. That is the essence of release. You stop struggling against the natural flow of things. You no longer insist that the world should fit your idea of peace. You discover peace within the world as it already is. Take another breath now. Notice how the air moves through your nose, your chest, your belly. Each breath a wave, returning to the ocean. Each exhale a surrender. If thoughts arise about work, about someone you miss, about what comes next, greet them gently, as if greeting travelers passing along the same road. You do not need to walk with them. You simply bow and continue your own step. Release is also compassion. When you stop gripping your own suffering, your hands open to hold the world. The river does not choose which stone to flow around. It embraces all. Likewise, a quiet heart flows through joy and sorrow without judgment. As you walk, feel gratitude for the body that carries you, even when tired, even when aching. This body is your oldest friend. It breathes without demand. It walks even when your mind resists. To release is to thank it, to trust it. Now the sun rises through the mist. Light falls upon the moss-covered stones. The mountain wakes. You can see tiny dewdrops on the leaves, trembling like small worlds. You take another step, and another, and with each one, the ground teaches you the same truth. You belong here. No matter where you go, the earth accepts your weight without complaint. It doesn't require you to prove your worth. It only asks you to walk gently. When we walk mindfully, every step writes a small poem on the soil. It says, I am here. It says, this is enough. It says, thank you. Letting go is not about absence. It's about fullness, the fullness that comes when you stop grasping. The bamboo does not try to be the pine. The cloud does not envy the mountain. They exist in their own rhythm, in effortless harmony. You too are part of that same harmony. So now, as you continue along this path, imagine each step as a breath, each breath as a wave, each wave returning to the sea. You are not walking to peace, you are walking as peace. And from this stillness, stories begin to arise, 20 small ripples of wisdom, each story a reflection of the same teaching. That true freedom is found not in holding tighter, but in letting go. As you listen to them, walk slowly in your mind. Let each tale breathe. Pause between lines. Feel how the words land within you, as a pebble might settle at the bottom of a clear pond. Do not hurry. This journey is not towards something new, but back to what was always waiting. The wind moves again through the bamboo grove. The scent of incense drifts from the temple hall. You bow, not to worship, but to acknowledge that the sacred lives in each step, each sound, each breath. This is the heart of walking meditation. To move without chasing, to breathe without clinging, to live without fear of change. Because when you release, you return to balance, to simplicity, to the quiet joy of being alive. Pause here. Breathe in once more. Let your shoulders soften. Feel your heartbeat. Slow, steady, ancient. The stories that follow are the continuation of this breath, each one a lantern along the same path. You will meet monks, travelers, children, villagers, and sages. They will stumble, awaken, and release as you are learning to release. Each story ends not with applause, but with silence, because silence is the final teacher. Now begin to walk. Let the first story unfold with the rhythm of your step. And as you move, remember, the journey itself is the destination. Story 1. The first lantern on your journey through walking meditation, practicing release. The mountain path wound through silver mist. Each stone was cool from a night's dew, and the air held the quiet rhythm of morning cicadas. A young monk named Taro walked barefoot, a straw hat shading his face. Every step was slow, deliberate, heel arched toe. He had been walking since dawn, carrying a single bowl in his hand. His master had sent him to the river valley below with simple instruction. Walk until you no longer try to arrive. At first, Taro didn't understand. Was he meant to reach the village? The riverbank? How could one walk without trying to arrive? Yet he obeyed, as disciples do, and descended from the monastery gates into the living hush of the forest. Hours passed. Birds sang. Leaves whispered. But inside him, a storm grew. Why must I walk so slowly, he thought. Surely, I can move faster and still be mindful. Why waste a day? He adjusted his pace, letting his body move as it wished, brisk, efficient, controlled. Soon, sweat gathered on his brow. His shoulders tightened. He thought of the master, of his own progress, of the pride he felt being chosen for this lesson. He reached the river sooner than he expected, but when he looked into the flowing water, he felt nothing. No peace, no insight, only tired legs and a restless mind. He sat by the shore and whispered bitterly, I have arrived, yet I feel no different. Across the water, an old woman knelt washing vegetables. Her hair was silver, her back bent with years of work. She glanced up and saw the young monk frowning at the stream. You look as if you've lost something, she said with a gentle smile. I was told to walk until I no longer tried to arrive, Taro replied. But I have arrived, and still I do not understand. The woman chuckled softly, wringing the water from a turnip leaf. Then perhaps, she said, you should walk back the same way you came, but this time let the river lead you. The river? He asked, confused. Yes, she said. It flows without hurrying. It never tries to arrive, yet it always reaches the sea. Taro gazed at the water. It glided past stones and reeds, swirling around obstacles without resistance. The more he watched, the more he noticed how it shimmered, how it whispered over pebbles like a breath. So he stood, bowed to the old woman, and began to walk upstream, slowly, silently. This time, he didn't count his steps. He didn't think of arrival. He listened instead to the soft squelch of soil beneath his feet, to the buzz of dragonflies hovering, to the small heartbeat of the forest that seemed to pulse with his own. Each sound became a teacher. Each moment became complete. When a wind brushed his cheek, he didn't label it wind. When a leaf landed on his shoulder, he didn't brush it away. He simply let the world move through him. By dusk, he reached the monastery gate. The master was sweeping the courtyard, his broom moving like a wave upon the stones. Taro bowed low. Master, he said, I walked to the river and back. On the way there, I hurried. On the way back, I released. The distance was the same, but the journey was different. The master smiled faintly. And what did you learn? That when I tried to arrive, Taro said, I walked inside time. But when I released, time walked inside me. The broom paused mid-stroke. The master nodded once, slowly. That is the beginning, he said. Later that night, The monastery was quiet except for the low hum of crickets. Taro sat beneath the eaves, gazing at the moon reflected in the courtyard pond. Its reflection trembled gently with the ripples of the water, always changing, never lost. He realized then that even the moonlight never arrives. It simply shines, moment by moment, wherever it falls. He whispered into the night, "To walk without arriving is to walk forever home." Pause here. Breathe deeply once more. Feel the stillness between inhale and exhale. Release the need to understand. Release the need to measure how far you've come. Just walk softly, heel, arch, toe, through your own life as Taro did, letting each step be enough. Because when you walk without control, the world walks with you. Peace does not wait at the end of the road. It breathes within every step taken without striving. Story 2, another step in walking meditation, practicing release. The morning mist still clung to the valley when Sister May left the temple. She walked with a wicker basket on her back, heading toward the nearby village. Her task was simple, to collect herbs for the sick, yet her heart was heavy. For many weeks, she had cared for a dying man in the temple infirmary, a farmer named June, whose lungs had grown weak from years of dust and labor. Despite her efforts, medicines, chants, prayers, his breathing had become shallow, his eyes distant. Last night, as she sat by his side, he whispered, "Why do you struggle so much to keep me here, sister? Isn't this body already like a leaf in autumn?" May had no answer. She simply held his hand until dawn. When the temple bell rang, June had stopped breathing. Now, as she walked the stone path toward the forest, her thoughts would not settle. Each step echoed with the same question. Why did he die when I worked so hard to save him? The path was steep. A thin fog curled around the pine trunks like incense smoke. She stopped to rest by a small shrine, where a wooden statue of Canon, the Bodhisattva of compassion, smiled serenely through the moss. "How can I be compassionate?" May whispered. "If compassion only ends in loss." The silence around her seemed to deepen. A drop of water fell from the roof of the shrine, striking the ground with a soft plip. And then, somewhere nearby, she heard coughing, weak but alive. Following the sound, May found an old man crouched beside the path. His robe was torn, his hands trembling. A small bundle of sticks lay scattered on the ground. Without hesitation, she knelt. "Are you hurt, grandfather?" The man looked up, his eyes clouded yet kind. "Just old bones," he said, trying to smile. "They forget how to obey." She offered him water from her gourd and gathered the fallen sticks. "Let me carry these for you." He laughed quietly. "Then what lesson will I carry?" May hesitated. The question felt strange, light, yet heavy. The old man continued, "I've walked this path for 70 years. When I was young, I carried my child on my back. Later, I carried grief. Now, I carry wood. The burden always changes, but the act of walking never does." They began walking together, slowly, side by side. For a while, neither spoke. The path grew narrow, and they crossed a small wooden bridge over a stream. The water sparkled in the light. Tiny fish darted below, moving as one, flowing, turning, separating, joining again. The old man stopped midway, looking down. "Do you see the fish?" Yes, May said. They do not cling to one another, he said. They drift apart and return as the current leads them. None grieve the separation, for the water always holds them all. May watch the fish, their motion effortless. A gentle warmth began to rise in her chest, like sunlight through fog. After some time, they reached a clearing where the forest opened to a wide meadow. The air smelled of grass and rain. The old man set down his bundle and turned to her. "Child," he said softly, "compassion is not holding someone away from change. It's walking with them through change. To love without letting go is not love. It's fear disguised as kindness." His words fell like stones into the pond of her heart. She bowed deeply. "I thought compassion meant saving him," she whispered. "But maybe compassion means releasing him." The old man smiled, eyes bright as the morning sky. When the river meets the sea, it doesn't mourn the loss of its path. May looked up, and for the first time noticed the man's robe was perfectly clean, untouched by mud. His feet left no prints in grass. When she blinked, he was gone. Only the bundle of sticks remained. She stood still for a long while, the wind moving gently through her sleeves. Then she picked up one stick and placed it into her basket, not as a burden, but as remembrance. Walking back to the temple, she no longer counted her steps. Each one felt lighter. The forest now seemed alive in every direction. The scent of pine, the hush of leaves, the shimmer of life that had no beginning and no end. At the temple gate, she passed the same pond where the moon had reflected the night before. The water rippled with morning light. She bowed and whispered, "June, may your river reach the sea." The breeze brushed her cheek like a soft answer. That evening, she returned to the small shrine where she had met the old man. The statue of Canon looked the same, moss-covered, silent. Yet May saw something new. The Bodhisattva's hands, open and gentle, did not grasp. They offered. Compassion, she realized, was not the act of keeping. It was the art of allowing. She sat before the statue, closed her eyes, and let her breath flow like the river below the bridge. Each inhale carried gratitude. Each exhale carried release. She no longer felt sorrow for June's death, only tenderness, the kind that moves like water through all things. Pause here, breathe softly, feel your chest rise, then fall. When you lose someone, do not close your heart. Let it flow wider like the river that becomes the sea. In walking meditation, every goodbye becomes a continuation. The footsteps that leave your side still echo in the vastness of being. True compassion is not in holding tight, but in letting go with love. The act of release is the highest form of care. Story 3. A step deeper into walking meditation. Practicing release, the temple courtyard shimmered after the rain. Drops clung to the edges of the roof tiles, falling one by one onto the stone below. In the center of the yard stood a young monk named Run. He held a broom in his hands, the handle smooth from years of use. The abbot had told him that sweeping the courtyard was part of meditation. Rin thought that meant sweeping fast, sweeping well, making the stones shine like mirrors. So each morning, he worked with fierce focus. His arms moved swiftly, his breath quickened, his brow glistened with sweat. By sunrise, the courtyard gleamed, yet his mind did not. One morning, the abbot watched from the veranda. "Run," he called. "Why do you sweep?" To make the courtyard clean, master. The abbot smiled. Then why is your heart still dusty? Rin froze, broom mid-stroke. Dusty? Yes, said the abbot, tapping his chest. The stones shine, but here you still chase the dirt. Rin bowed his head, ashamed. Then how should I sweep? Stop sweeping, the abbot replied and walked away. For days, Rin sat by the courtyard, unsure what the lesson meant. Without his daily task, he felt restless. The world seemed too still. He tried meditating inside the hall, but the silence pressed against him like a heavy blanket. On the third day, he returned to the yard and stared at the broom leaning against the wall. Rain had left puddles between the stones, reflecting strips of sky. A leaf drifted across the surface of the water. It floated without hurry, without aim, yet every ripple carried it forward. He whispered, "The leaf moves, yet it does not try to move." Something loosened inside him. Rin picked up the broom again, but this time his hands did not rush. He listened first to the soft rasp of straw against stone, the sigh of wind between the pines. He noticed the space between strokes, the tiny pauses where the world breathed with him. He swept, but he no longer swept for the courtyard. He swept with the courtyard. Each motion became part of a greater rhythm, like waves smoothing sand, like wind passing through bamboo. In that rhythm, he felt something rare, stillness that moved. The abbot returned quietly and watched. Rin's movements were slow now, his breath long and steady. The broom glided across the stones as if guided by water. When Rin noticed the abbot, he bowed. "I have not finished cleaning," he said. The abbot looked at the wet stones, glistening like glass. "Yes, you have," he said, "and so has the rain." Rin smiled, understanding. "Then stillness can sweep too?" The abbot chuckled. "Stillness sweeps everything. You only help it remember." That evening, the temple bell rang as dusk settled. Rin walked to the edge of the forest path. The air smelled of pine and earth. He began to walk, heel, arch, toe, feeling each contact with the ground. The cicadas sang. His robe brushed against the grass. He realized that even in motion, silence remained unbroken. He stopped beneath a cedar tree and listened, not to sound, but to what lived beneath sound. It was there, the deep pulse of being that never moved and never stopped moving. He bowed to it. From that night onward, Rin's sweeping became a quiet ritual. Visitors often paused outside the temple gate, watching the young monk at work. They said he seemed like part of the landscape, a single breath drawn by the mountain itself. Sometimes a leaf would fall as he swept, and he would pause to watch it spin to the ground before continuing. When wind scattered dust across the stones again, he never sighed. He simply began anew, smiling, for he had learned that stillness was not the absence of action, but the absence of resistance inside action. Pause here. Let her breath slow. Feel your heartbeat quiet. You too can sweep like Rin. Whatever your work, typing, cooking, walking, let the silence behind each motion guide you. Do not chase completion. Let completion chase you. Every small act can be meditation when you stop fighting the moment that holds it. True stillness is not found by stopping movement, but by moving without struggle. When you release the urge to finish, every action becomes complete. Story 4, a meditation on impermanence, the comfort found in change. The mountain temple had a single cherry tree that bloomed brighter than any other. Each spring, its petals turned the courtyard into a sea of soft pink, and pilgrims traveled from faraway provinces to see it. An elderly monk named Shin tended the tree. For 50 years, he swept fallen petals, watered the roots, and bowed each morning beneath its branches. To him, it was more than a tree. It was a companion through all seasons of his life. But one winter, lightning struck the mountainside. The old tree split. Its trunk burned black, its branches broke. When spring returned, only one small branch blossomed, trembling in the wind. Shin stood beneath it and felt a pain sharper than the chill air. He whispered, "Why must beauty fade?" For days, he avoided the courtyard. The empty trunk stood like a wound in his heart. One evening, as he sat by the pond, a novice monk approached, holding a broom. "Master Shin," the boy said softly, "the wind keeps blowing petals from the surviving branch. Should I sweep them away?" Shin looked at the scattered petals, small, bright, dying. He nodded. "Yes, sweep them, but sweep gently. They have traveled far to reach the ground." The boy began sweeping slowly. The petals gathered into a small pile, delicate as snow. When he finished, he turned to Shin. "Why do petals fall, master?" Shin smiled faintly. "Because the branch cannot hold them forever." That night, Shin could not sleep. He walked outside, barefoot, the moon glowing pale above the blackened tree. The single living branch swayed lightly, whispering against the wind. One blossom fell, turning in the air before landing on his hand. It was cold, soft, alive for one final instant. He thought, even in its falling, it completes its purpose. The next morning, Shin gathered the fallen petals and placed them in a small wooden bowl on the altar. He lit incense and bowed deeply. "Everything I love," he murmured, "must someday change. The tree, the temple, even this body." He watched the incense smoke curl upward, forming shapes that dissolved almost instantly. And yet, he noticed the fragrance remained, invisible, lingering. He realized that impermanence was not cruelty, it was continuity. Form vanished, but essence stayed. As spring turned to summer, new shoots sprouted from the charred trunk. Tiny leaves unfolded, shy but determined. Shin tended to them carefully, watering the soil each morning. The novice watched him. "Master, I thought the tree was dying." "So did I," Shin replied, smiling. "But death, it seems, was only sleeping." The boy frowned, puzzled. "Then will it live forever now?" Shin laughed softly. "No, but it will live again and again, just as the dawn follows every dusk. Impermanence is the rhythm that keeps life from becoming still." Years later, when Shin's hair had turned completely white, the cherry tree bloomed again. Not as grand as before, but enough to cover the courtyard with pink light. Pilgrims came once more, and they found the old monk sitting quietly beneath it, eyes half closed, a faint smile on his lips. One visitor asked, "Do you not mourn the years it did not bloom?" Shin opened his eyes and said, "The petals that fell fed the roots that bloom today. Nothing is lost, only transformed." That evening, a soft rain began to fall. Shin sat on the temple veranda, watching the petals drift away on streams of rainwater. He remembered his youth, the countless times he had swept this same courtyard, thinking he could keep it perfect. Now he simply watched it change. A feeling of peace spread through him. Not the peace of stillness, but the peace of acceptance. He whispered to the rain, "All that comes must go, and all that goes returns in another form. I'm not separate from this." As the night deepened, the last petal slid into the pond and vanished beneath a ripple. Shin closed his eyes and felt no sorrow, only gratitude for the years, the blooms, the endings that made beginnings possible. When morning came, the sky was clear. The novice found the old monk still sitting beneath the tree, his face calm, his breath quiet. He had passed away in meditation, palms resting on his knees. Above him, a single new blossom had opened overnight, facing the sun. Pause here. Let your own breath slow. Feel the rise and fall, appearing, vanishing, returning. Each inhale is birth. Each exhale is death. Between them lies the whole cycle of existence. When you walk, do not resist change. Let it walk with you. Impermanence is not your enemy. It is your most faithful companion. Nothing is lost. Everything transforms. When you accept impermanence, you no longer fear it. You become part of its endless bloom. Story 5. A meditation on letting go of control. The freedom found in surrender. In the southern valley, where the rice fields stretched like sheets of green silk, there lived a monk named Haru. He was known throughout the province for his discipline. No one rose earlier, no one worked harder, and no one demanded more perfection from himself. Each morning before sunrise, he would light a single lantern, sit by the edge of the pond, and recite sutras until the light turned gold. Then he would tend to the garden, trimming each bush with exact precision. If one leaf grew uneven, he clipped it. If one flower leaned sideways, he tied it straight. His garden was flawless, and so he believed was his mind. One day, the abbot approached him while he was pruning a bush of white chrysanthemums. "Haru," he said, "your garden is beautiful, but tell me, do you ever rest?" "Rest invites weeds, master," Haru replied, still trimming. The abbot smiled. "Then perhaps it is time to meet your weeds." He handed Haru a small wooden bowl. "Tomorrow, take this to the mountain lake. Fill it with water, but do not spill a single drop on your way back." Haru bowed confidently. "I will return with the bowl full." At dawn, he set out. The trail climbed steeply through the forest, rocks slick with dew. He kept both hands wrapped tightly around the bowl, eyes fixed on its surface. Every step demanded control. When a bird startled nearby, he froze. When wind brushed his robe, he clenched his jaw, adjusting his grip. Hours passed before he reached the lake, a vast mirror reflecting the sky. He knelt, filled the bowl carefully, and began his descent. His arms trembled from tension. His breath grew shallow. At one point, a single drop spilled over the edge, and panic flashed across his face. He hurried, tightening his muscles, fighting every sway of his body. By the time he reached the temple, sweat soaked his robe, and his hands quivered violently. He presented the bowl before the abbot. "Here, master," he said, exhausted but proud. "I did not spill more than a single drop." The abbot nodded. "And what did you see along the path?" "Nothing," Haru said. "I cannot look away." "Ah," the abbot said softly. "Then you carried water but lost the world." The next morning, the abbot gave him the same bowl. Return to the lake, he said, and fill it again. But this time, walk as if the water belongs to the wind. Haru frowned, unsure what that meant, yet he obeyed. When he filled the bowl again, he loosened his grip slightly. He let the rhythm of his breathing guide his steps. He noticed the way the light shimmered through the trees, the distant sound of a waterfall, the scent of moss and rain. A few drops spilled, but he didn't tighten his hold. He smiled. When he returned, the bowl was only half full. The abbot looked into it, then into Haru's face. "What did you see this time?" "Everything," Haru said quietly. "And somehow I saw myself too." The abbot placed a hand on his shoulder. "You see, Haru, life is like water. The more tightly you hold it, the less of it remains. Letting go doesn't mean losing control. It means trusting the current that carries you." That evening, Haru went to his garden. He stared at the flowers he had once trimmed to perfection. Some had grown uneven again. One branch leaned too far, another tangled with its neighbor. He lifted his scissors, then lowered them. For the first time, he left the garden untouched. The moon rose, and the uneven blossoms swayed softly in the breeze. They looked more alive than ever. In the following weeks, visitors noticed something different about the garden. It seemed wilder, freer, yet more harmonious. Colors blended where before they had been divided. Bees hovered lazily among the blossoms, and small birds built nests in the untrimmed shrubs. One visitor asked Haru, "Why have you stopped pruning?" He smiled, "Because the garden never needed my perfection, only my presence." Months later, a storm swept through the valley. Winds tore branches from trees. Rain flooded the paths, petals scattered like snow. The monks hurried to secure the temple roof. Haru went to the garden. He stood in the downpour, his robes soaked, watching the storm undo all he had tended. He did not fight it. He did not try to protect the blossoms. He simply stood, breathing, watching. When the storm passed, the garden was a mess of mud and broken stems. But amid the ruin, tiny buds remained, resilient, waiting. Haru knelt, smiling through the rain. He whispered, "So this is how beauty learns to begin again." That night, he wrote a verse and placed it on the temple altar. Control is the shadow of fear. Surrender is the light that frees it. The flower blooms not because it commands the sun, but because it opens to it. He no longer measured his days by how much he completed, but by how much he allowed to be. Pause here. Let your breath return to its natural rhythm. Feel your body soften, your hands unclench. Ask yourself, what bowl are you still gripping? What water are you afraid to spill? When you loosen your hold, life does not fall apart. It flows where it always meant to go. Letting go of control does not mean losing direction. It means trusting the flow of life more than your fear of it. Story 6. A meditation on the weight of expectations. Learning to walk lightly through self-judgment and pressure. The temple stood high above the clouds, reached only by a winding trail of stone steps that seemed endless. For centuries, monks climbed them to seek wisdom, but few noticed how the mountain itself never climbed. It simply stood. Among the youngest monks was Kai, eager and ambitious. He was quick with scripture, sharp with logic, and admired for his dedication. Yet no matter how much praise he received, it never felt like enough. Every meditation, Every chore, every word from the master. He weighed them like coins in a scale that never balanced. One morning, the abbot called him. Kai, he said, today you will carry water from the valley well, enough for the whole temple. Kai bowed. Yes, master. He felt proud. Surely the task was a test of endurance, a chance to prove his worth. He set off with 2 large wooden buckets balanced on a pole across his shoulders. At first, he moved quickly, determined to show strength. The sun rose, and sweat began to sting his eyes. The trail wound downward, steep and slippery with moss. Each step echoed with the same thought: don't fail, don't fall, don't spill. When he finally reached the well, his shoulders ached. He filled the buckets, adjusted the pole, and began to climb back up. The weight was crushing. Halfway up, his breath came in ragged gasps. He gritted his teeth and pushed harder. Then he saw an older monk sitting beside the path, carving wood. The man looked up and smiled. Young one, why do you frown as you climb? Kai panted. Because the water must not spill. The old monk nodded. And who told you the mountain forbids a spill? Kai said nothing and continued his climb, angry that the elder had slowed him. By the time he reached the temple gate, his shoulders were raw and his legs trembling. He had spilled a little water despite all his effort. The abbot met him at the steps. You seem heavy, he said. Kai forced a bow. I have done as asked, master. The water is here. The abbot nodded toward the buckets. Yes, the water is here. But where are you? Kai frowned. I don't understand. You climbed the mountain carrying not just water, the abbot said, but every expectation you've ever believed. That night, Kai cannot sleep. He replayed the climb in his mind, the strain, the fear of failure, the burning in his shoulders. He realized that most of the pain had not come from the buckets, but from the voice inside him that demanded perfection. The next morning, he asked permission to carry water again. The abbot smiled, then carry it differently. He descended once more, the same path, the same buckets, but this time, before filling them, he sat by the well and watched the water. It shimmered quietly, reflecting clouds that drifted without hurry. He saw his own reflection there, tense, uncertain, grasping. He whispered, if the clouds can move without purpose, maybe I can climb without pride. He filled the buckets again, lifted the pole, and began to walk. His pace was slower, his breath deeper. Each step became a rhythm. Lift, breathe, release. He noticed the sound of cicadas, the scent of wet stone, the play of sunlight through leaves. He smiled for the first time in weeks. When a few drops spilled, he laughed softly. I am not here to deliver perfect water, he said aloud. I am here to learn how to walk. When he reached the temple, the abbot was sweeping the steps. Kai set down the buckets and bowed. The water may not be full, master, but my heart feels lighter. The abbot looked into the buckets. They hold enough, he said. When you stop trying to be full, you find you already are. He tapped the young monk's shoulder. Do you see now? Expectations are heavier than water. Kai bowed again, this time not from duty, but gratitude. The mountain breeze brushed past them, carrying the scent of pine and the soft sound of flowing water far below. From that day forward, Kai moved differently. When he swept, he no longer raced to finish. When he meditated, he no longer tried to silence thought. He simply let it drift by like clouds in the same sky that reflected in the well. He learned that the weight he had carried all along was invisible, self-made. And as he released it, others noticed. His steps grew quiet, his eyes calm. The other novices began to follow his rhythm. No one spoke of enlightenment, yet the courtyard itself seemed lighter. Months later, during a heavy rainstorm, Kai again went down to fetch water. The trail had turned muddy. The bucket swayed. Halfway up, he stopped, tilted his head to the sky, and let the rain fill the buckets naturally. He laughed, alone in the storm. When he returned to the temple, dripping wet, the abbot met him at the gate. "The rain carried the water for me," Kai said, bowing low. "I just walked with it." The abbot smiled. "Then you have learned the secret of the mountain. The less you hold, the higher you rise." Pause here. Let your shoulders soften. Notice any invisible weight you're carrying. The need to prove, to perfect, to be enough. Set it down just for a moment. Feel how light your step becomes when you stop trying to measure it. In walking meditation, release means this: to walk with life, not ahead of it. Expectations are the heaviest burdens because we build them ourselves. When you release them, every step becomes weightless. Story 7. A meditation on compassion for oneself. Forgiving your own imperfection as part of the path. In a quiet valley, surrounded by bamboo and wildflowers, stood a small temple rarely visited by travelers. Its only resident was a middle-aged monk named Sora. He had lived there alone for 10 years, tending the grounds, chanting at dawn, and offering prayers for anyone who wandered by. Sora's heart was kind, but heavy. Years ago, during his early training, he had made a grave mistake. He had lost his temper and struck another novice during an argument. Though the abbot had forgiven him long ago, Sora could never forgive himself. He believed that a monk who once caused harm could never truly serve peace. So he withdrew from the world, devoting his days to silent penance. He helped all beings, except himself. One morning, while sweeping the temple path, Sora noticed a small sparrow lying motionless on the ground. Its wing was bent, its breathing faint. He knelt beside it. "Poor little one," he whispered, "you have fallen." He gently picked it up, wrapped it in his sleeve, and carried it inside. He made a nest of straw and rice husks near the fire, then tended to the bird day and night, feeding it soaked grains, cleaning its feathers, whispering sutras to soothe its trembling. Days passed. The sparrow began to chirp again, softly at first, then stronger. When Sora opened the window, it hopped to the edge, paused, and looked back at him. Then it spread its wings and flew away. He watched it disappear into the sky and felt something stir inside his chest. He whispered, "I can forgive a bird its broken wing. Why can't I forgive my own?" That night, he dreamed of walking through a forest of mirrors. Each mirror reflected him differently. One young, one angry, one laughing, one weeping. In the last mirror, he saw himself as he was now, older, quieter, carrying invisible weight. A voice, soft as wind through grass, spoke. "You cannot serve the world if you refuse to sit at the same table as your own heart." He awoke before dawn, tears on his cheeks. At sunrise, he went to the temple pond. The surface was still, reflecting the pale pink of the morning sky. He saw his face there, tired but gentle. He bowed to his reflection and said, "For 10 years, I have offered compassion to all beings except the one living in this skin. Today, I will bow to him too." He took a single pebble and dropped it into the pond. Ripples spread outward in perfect circles, fading slowly. "That is how forgiveness moves," he whispered. "It begins here and travels outward." That afternoon, a traveler appeared, a young woman, exhausted and dusty from the road. She asked for water and rest. Sora welcomed her, prepared tea, and listened as she spoke of her troubles. She had left her home after an argument with her father and carried guilt for words she couldn't take back. Sora listened quietly, then said, "When you broke his peace, did you also lose your own?" She nodded. He poured her more tea. "Then perhaps forgive both. We are not two hearts. We are one mirror." She frowned. "But I don't deserve forgiveness yet." Sora smiled gently. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you return to like breath." She stayed the night. Before dawn, she bowed deeply to him and left, lighter than she came. When she disappeared down the mountain path, Sora realized he had spoken to her as if speaking to himself. That evening, a soft rain began to fall. The roof of the temple sang with droplets. Sora sat on the veranda, the sound washing through him like a lullaby. He remembered the day of his mistake, the anger, the shame, the silence that followed. He closed his eyes and saw that younger version of himself, trembling, lost. He said quietly, "You were learning. You were human. You were trying to love in a world that confuses love with perfection." He imagined placing a hand on that younger shoulder, not to scold, but to comfort. He felt the weight begin to lift. Later, when the moon rose, he lit a lantern and walked outside. Mist hung low over the bamboo grove. He could hear frogs calling in the distance, their voices echoing across the valley. He whispered a prayer. "May all beings who cannot forgive themselves find peace. May those who fall see that falling is also part of the path." A cool wind brushed his face, as if the night itself had heard him. He smiled, bowed once more, and returned to his temple. He no longer felt alone. From then on, Sora taught forgiveness to anyone who visited. He would say, "To forgive yourself is not to excuse your mistakes. It is to recognize that even mistakes are steps on the same sacred road." He often told the story of the sparrow, and when visitors asked if it ever returned, he would point to the sky and smile. "It never left. It learned to fly inside me." Pause here. Let your breath soften. Feel your heartbeat, steady, forgiving. Every scar, every regret, every broken piece is also an opening. When you breathe with kindness toward yourself, you mend the world quietly, one heartbeat at a time. You cannot offer peace to others if you withhold it from yourself. Forgive yourself not because you are perfect, but because you are still learning. Story 8. A meditation on the art of presence. Learning to truly see the moment before it passes. A narrow dirt path wound through the cedar forest, cool and dim beneath the canopy. On that path walked an elderly monk named Eno, carrying nothing but a walking stick and a small bag of rice. He had been blind for 20 years. Yet those who met him swore that he saw more clearly than anyone else in the monastery. He could sense when a flower bloomed, when a storm was coming, when someone's heart was troubled. One afternoon, a young monk named Daichi was assigned to guide him down to the village. Daichi was proud of his sharp eyes and quick mind. He pitied Ino and thought, how terrible to live without sight. When they reached the forest, Daichi said, Master, take my arm. The path is uneven. Ino chuckled softly. I've walked this path 100 times. You may take my arm instead if you wish to see better. Daichi frowned, not understanding, but he obeyed, and they began to walk. The forest was silent except for the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. After a while, Ino said, Describe what you see. Daichi eagerly replied, Tall cedars, ferns by the path, a stream ahead. Ino nodded. Now describe what you feel. Daichi hesitated. The air is cool. Ino smiled. Good. And what do you hear? Daichi listened. Birds and wind. Which bird? Ino asked. Daichi strained his ears. The song was delicate, full of small trills and pauses. I don't know, he said finally. It is a bush warbler, Ino said softly. It only sings before rain. The sound of its throat is softer when the air grows heavy. Daichi stared at him. How can you know that? Ino tapped his chest lightly. I'll listen with this. They continued walking. A few drops of rain began to fall, darkening the soil. The scent of wet cedar filled the air. Tell me, Daichi, Ino said, what color is this moment? The younger monk laughed. Master, rain has no color. Then close your eyes, Ino said. Daichi did. The sound of rain thickened. He could hear each drop landing on the leaves. Behind his eyelids, the world turned into rippling shades of gray and silver. What color is it now? Ino asked again. Daichi whispered, It feels blue, maybe silver. Ino nodded. Yes, you begin to see. By the time they reached the village, the rain had stopped. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of soil and firewood. Children were laughing somewhere near the market. Ino paused and tilted his head, smiling. Someone is roasting chestnuts. Daichi looked around and saw the vendor just ahead. How could you tell? The laughter changed, Ino said. When people smell sweetness, their laughter rises. When they smell smoke, it deepens. Daichi said nothing. His pride was beginning to dissolve into awe. They stopped by the riverbank. Ino handed Daichi a cup and said, Fill this with water, then bring it to me. Daichi scooped the cup full and returned. Now tell me, Ino said, what did the river say to you? Daichi frowned. Nothing. It's just water. Ino took the cup, sipped, and smiled. The river said it was patient. It said it does not rush to the sea, yet it always arrives. Daichi lowered his gaze. I don't understand, Master. You will, Ino replied, when you stop looking for meaning and start meeting it. That night, they rested at a small inn in the village. A paper lantern flickered beside them, throwing soft light across the walls. Ino turned to Daichi. When I lost my eyes, he said, I thought the world had ended, but blindness didn't take sight away. It gave me back the world. I stopped seeing what I expected and started feeling what was actually here. Daichi asked, then what is presence? Ino smiled. Presence is the space between what you think and what truly is. Most people fill that space with noise. A mindful person keeps it clear so life can speak. The next morning, as they walked back toward the temple, sunlight broke through the trees. Dewdrops sparkled on the leaves like scattered stars. Ino said, Tell me, Daichi, what do you see now? Daichi looked around slowly. I see light dancing on every leaf, he said. I see shadows moving like breath. I see the mountain breathing. Eno smiled. Then today your eyes opened. They walked the rest of the way in silence, their steps in rhythm with the mountain wind. When they reached the gate, Daichi bowed deeply. Master, he said, I've learned that I've spent my whole life looking, but rarely seeing. Eno nodded. When you see the moment, you see eternity. When you miss the moment, eternity becomes just another passing cloud. He raised his walking stick toward the horizon. You can only touch the world through now. Remember that, and blindness will never find you. That night, Daichi sat alone outside his quarters. The forest hummed softly in the distance. He closed his eyes, feeling the world move around him. The brush of wind, the smell of rain lingering, the rhythm of life unfolding without needing to be seen. He whispered, I see you now. And the silence replied, pause here, breathe gently. Feel how much the world is saying when you simply listen. You don't need perfect vision to witness beauty. You need presence, the courage to meet what is already here before it changes form. Presence is the art of meeting life before the mind begins to name it. When you are fully here, the world becomes infinite. Story 9, a meditation on the echo of gratitude. Learning to thank the moment even when it fades. Morning sunlight touched the roofs of a small fishing village along the eastern coast. The waves murmured softly against the shore, and the scent of salt mixed with the smoke of breakfast fires. A monk named Ado had come from a mountain temple to spend a season there in silence. His master had told him, when you have learned enough from stillness, go learn from sound. So Ado rented a small hut near the edge of the water. Each dawn, he walked the shoreline with bare feet, feeling the cool sand sink under his heels. The villagers thought him strange but harmless, a quiet man who bowed to the sea as if it were a teacher. One morning, as Ado sat on a rock watching the sunrise, a fisherman named Ray approached him. The man was young, strong, and impatient. Monk, he said, every day I see you sitting here, watching the same waves. Don't you get bored? Ado smiled. Can one be bored of breathing? Ray snorted. The sea is the same every day. Nothing changes. Ado looked at the horizon. Then you have not looked long enough. Days later, a storm swept through the coast. Winds howled. Boats broke free from their moorings. Roofs rattled under the rain. Ray's small fishing boat was lost to the waves. When the storm passed, the beach was littered with driftwood and debris. Ray sat among the wreckage, staring at the sea with empty eyes. Ado approached quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Ray and said, the sea took your boat. Ray's jaw tightened. It took my living, my pride, my everything. Ado nodded. Yes, it gives and it takes. That is its way. Ray slammed the cup down, spilling the tea. You speak of it like it's holy. What's there to be grateful for? Ado looked at the waves, calm again under the returning sun. The storm passed, he said softly. That too is something. Ray stood abruptly and walked away. But the monk's words lingered. For days, he avoided the shore. He worked repairing nets for other fishermen, but his heart felt hollow. One evening, as he walked home, he saw Ado sitting again by the sea. The monk was humming quietly, not a song, but a tone that matched the rhythm of the waves. Something in the sound drew Ray closer. He sat beside him in silence for a long time before saying, "I hate this sea." Ado replied, "Then hate it fully. Listen to it as you hate it." Ray frowned. "Why?" "Because gratitude cannot live where emotion is denied. Even anger has truth to teach." Ray sighed. "And what should I thank it for? For destroying what I built?" Ado turned to him. "Perhaps for showing you that nothing you build was ever truly yours." They sat until the moon rose, casting a silver path across the water. Finally, Ray whispered, "I can't forgive it yet." "You don't have to," Ado said. "Start by noticing what still holds you, this air, this light, this moment that still allows you to breathe." Ray closed his eyes. The smell of salt, the cool wind, the sound of waves, all pressed softly against his senses. For the first time since the storm, his breath felt steady. He murmured, "I'm still here." Ado smiled, and that is the first prayer of gratitude. In the weeks that followed, Ray began to walk the shore again. He picked up broken wood, repaired nets for others, and learned to fish on the rocks. Each morning, he greeted the sunrise, not with joy, but with acknowledgement. He often saw Ado walking nearby, silent, smiling. One dawn, when the sea was perfectly still, Ray approached him. "The ocean is calm again," he said, "almost as if it wants me to forgive it." Ado chuckled. "It does not seek forgiveness. It simply reflects yours." Ray tilted his head. "Forgiveness for what?" "For believing that life owes us calm seas," Ado said. Months passed, and the two became quiet friends. When Ado's time in the village ended, Ray came to see him off. He brought a small gift, a shell polished smooth by the waves. "It used to be sharp," Ray said. "The sea shaped it over years." Ado accepted it with a bow. "As it shaped you?" Ray smiled faintly. "I used to think gratitude meant saying thank you for what I liked. Now I think it means saying thank you even when it hurts." Ado's eyes glimmered. "Then you understand the sea." After the monk left, Ray kept walking the shoreline each morning. Sometimes he spoke aloud to the ocean. Sometimes he just listened. When storms returned, he no longer cursed. He secured his nets, said a silent prayer, and waited for calm. He began teaching the younger fishermen to do the same. "Don't fight the waves," he would say. "Bow to them. They're the teachers that never stop speaking." And when the first light of each dawn touched the water, he whispered softly, not to the sea, but to life itself, "Thank you." Years later, when Ray was old, villagers said that even in the harshest storms, his voice could still be heard on the wind, calm, steady, chanting the same two words, "Thank you." Pause here. Breathe slowly. Feel the soft gratitude that comes when you stop demanding that life always be kind. Every wave, every loss, every quiet sunrise leaves an echo. Gratitude is not for what stays, it is for what teaches. Gratitude is not the reward for comfort. It is the practice of seeing meaning in change. When you thank the moment, even as it fades, the moment never truly leaves. Story 10. A meditation on the mirror of relationships. Learning to release control over others and see them as reflections of self. At the edge of a quiet mountain town lived a potter named Kento. He was known for his skill. Every bowl, every cup he made was symmetrical, balanced, flawless. People came from faraway villages to buy his work, but few ever saw how tense his hands were as he shaped the clay. Kento demanded perfection, not just from his craft, but from everyone around him. His apprentices feared him, his friends avoided him. Even his younger brother, Riku, who helped in the workshop, had learned to speak only in short, careful sentences. One morning, Riku accidentally cracked a half-dried bowl while lifting it from the wheel. The sound of the break echoed like thunder in the small room. Kento spun around, eyes blazing. "You ruined it," he shouted. "Do you even pay attention?" Riku stammered, I'm sorry. It slipped. Kento slammed his hand on the table. "Sorry doesn't fix clay." The boy lowered his head and left the workshop, shoulders shaking. That night, Kento couldn't sleep. He sat by the kiln, staring into the flames. The broken bowl lay nearby. Its crack ran jagged through the smooth surface, a scar that refused to be ignored. As he watched, the heat from the kiln made the edges of the crack glow faintly. For a moment, it looked alive, imperfect but strangely beautiful. He picked up the bowl, turning it in his hands. The firelight shimmered through the fracture like a thread of gold. He thought of Riku's frightened face. He thought his own voice, harsh and loud. And he realized that the bowl had broken in his brother's hands. But the real break had been in his own heart long before. The next morning, he found Riku sitting by the river, throwing pebbles into the water. Kento sat beside him quietly. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Kento said, "When I was your age, I broke Father's best pot." Riku looked up in surprise. "You did?" "Yes," Kento said. He didn't shout. He smiled and said, "Then you've learned what clay really is." Riku frowned. What did he mean? Kento gazed at the rippling water. He meant that clay lives between strength and fragility. If you try to control it too much, it resists. If you ignore it, it collapses. It teaches balance, not dominance. He took a deep breath. "I forgot that lesson, and I've been trying to shape you the same way I shape my pots, until nothing is free." Riku's eyes softened. "Brother, I only wanted to help." Kento nodded. "And I only wanted perfection. But perfection is not peace." "I see that now." They returned to the workshop together. Kento picked up the broken bowl and placed it on the wheel again. "We will repair it," he said, "with gold dust and lacquer, kintsugi. It will show its scar proudly." Rika hesitated. "But it's not perfect." Kento smiled faintly. "Neither am I." They worked together in silence. The cracks gleamed gold when the lacquer dried. When it was done, the bowl looked whole again. Not flawless, but beautiful in its own truth. Kento held it up to the light. "When I look at this," he said, "I see myself. And you." Riku smiled for the first time in many days. In the weeks that followed, Kento's workshop changed. He spoke gently, laughed often, and began teaching his apprentices differently. When they made mistakes, he asked what the clay had tried to tell them. Some pieces he repaired with gold. Others he let remain chipped, reminding everyone that beauty doesn't vanish when control loosens. It grows. One day, a traveler visited his shop and admired the golden cracks in the bowl. "Why not hide the damage?" she asked. Kento replied, "Because the break is the story. Without it, the bowl and I would still be pretending to be whole." That evening, after the last pot had cooled, Kento sat outside watching Rika chase fireflies in the fading light. The air smelled of warm clay and pine smoke. He thought of all the years he had tried to shape his brother, his apprentices, his life, as if the world were just another lump of clay beneath his thumbs. He realized then that relationships were not things to be molded, but reflections to be understood. When he tried to control them, he saw only his own fear. When he released them, he saw his own heart mirrored back, whole, kind, forgiving. He whispered to the twilight, "May I never again try to fix what is already teaching me." Pause here. Close your eyes for a moment. Think of someone you've tried to change, to correct, to perfect. Breathe in. Now release that effort. See them as they are, not as you wish them to be. See them as your mirror, showing you what still needs to soften within. Relationships are mirrors, not sculptures. When you stop trying to shape others, you begin to see yourself clearly. Story 11, a meditation on the path of patience, learning to trust slow growth and unseen progress. The temple garden was silent except for the faint chirping of crickets. In one corner, a row of young saplings swayed in the morning breeze, thin and fragile. Each had been planted by a novice named June, who had joined the monastery only a year ago. June's heart burned with devotion, but also with restlessness. Every day, he watered the trees, pruned the leaves, and whispered prayers to them. But despite his effort, they barely grew. One afternoon, frustrated, he went to his teacher, an old monk named Haku, who was painting calligraphy in the courtyard. "Master," June said, bowing, "I've cared for those trees for months, yet they remain the same. Have I done something wrong?" Haku did not look up from his brush. "What are you waiting for?" "For them to grow," June replied. The old monk smiled faintly. "Then your impatience is the only thing that's growing." That night, June sat awake, staring at the saplings under the moonlight. They looked so small, delicate as candle flames in the wind. He thought of all his work, the watering, the soil, the care, and still they seemed unchanged. He whispered, "Maybe I'm not meant to be a gardener." The wind moved softly through the leaves, as if answering, but he was too discouraged to listen. The next morning, Haku invited June to walk with him to the mountain stream. Along the way, they passed an enormous pine tree that towered above the rest. Its roots gripped the stones. Its branches reached toward the clouds. "Master," June said, "this tree must be centuries old." Haku nodded. "Yes. When it was planted, it was no thicker than your thumb." June stared at it in awe. "How did it survive so long?" "By being patient," Haku said. "When storms came, it bent. When snow fell, it waited. When droughts came, it sent its roots deeper instead of complaining to the sky." He tapped the trunk gently. "Do you think this strength appeared overnight?" June shook his head. "Then why?" Haku asked softly. "Do you demand that your saplings skip the same years of quiet labor?" They reached the stream. The water moved slowly, curling around rocks, sparkling in the sunlight. Haku pointed at it. "See how it flows? Even water knows patience. It never rushes, yet it wears down mountains." He cupped his hands, filled them with water, and let it drip between his fingers. "Growth is not loud, June. It's steady. It hides inside the waiting." June knelt beside him, watching the water ripple away. He realized he had been treating patience like a punishment, something to endure until results came, rather than a teacher. He whispered, "So even waiting can be practice." Haku smiled, especially waiting. Weeks turned into months. June tended the trees quietly, without counting days or measuring height. Sometimes he sang to them softly. Sometimes he just sat in silence nearby, letting his breath slow to their rhythm. Seasons changed. Rain fell, sun returned, and still the sapling seemed only a little taller. But when June touched the soil one morning, he felt something firm beneath the surface. Roots strong and wide, gripping the earth. He smiled. "You've been growing all along, just not where I could see." Years passed. The saplings became trees. Their trunks thickened. Their shade grew deep. June himself grew older. His once restless energy transformed into calm steadiness. One day, a new novice came to him, frowning at the garden. "Master June," the boy said, "these trees take forever to grow. I water them every day, but they don't change." June chuckled. "Tell me, do you see the roots?" The boy shook his head. "Then trust what you cannot see," June said. "The unseen part of life is always the one that holds everything else." That evening, June sat beneath the tallest of his trees. The air was cool, filled with the scent of pine. He closed his eyes and remembered his younger self. Impatient, hurried, certain that progress could be measured by what was visible. Now he knew better. Patience was not about waiting for the reward. It was about becoming the kind of person who no longer needed reward to continue. He whispered to the roots beneath him, "Thank you for teaching me what silence can do." Later that night, he wrote a short verse and placed it on the altar. "The seed sleeps in darkness, the root drinks in silence, the flower opens without sound. This is how the world becomes whole." He bowed once, deeply, before blowing out the candle. Outside, a breeze moved through the leaves, slow, graceful, and endlessly patient. Pause here. Let your breath settle into its own pace. Notice that you are already breathing, the proof that patience lives in you. Everything real grows quietly. Your only task is to stay present long enough to notice it. Patience is not waiting for things to change. It is trusting that they already are. All growth begins beneath the surface in silence. Story 12. A meditation on the balance of effort and ease, walking the middle path between striving and surrender. The monastery's bell rang at dawn, its deep sound rolling through the valley like a slow wave. In the kitchen, monks moved quietly, preparing rice and tea. Outside, mist gathered above the garden ponds. Among them was a monk named Toshi, known for his strong will. Whatever he did with intensity. He scrubbed the floors until they gleamed, carried buckets until his shoulders ached, and meditated longer than anyone else in the temple. He believed enlightenment was like a mountain, and he was determined to climb it faster than anyone before him. But lately, his body had grown weary. His knees hurt during meditation. His breath came shallow, and still, he refused to rest. He told himself, "If I stop now, all my effort will be wasted." One morning, during walking meditation, Toshi's legs gave out. He fell onto the path, the sound of gravel scattering through the still air. Other monks rushed to help, but the abbot held up his hand. "Let him rest," he said. "Even the wind must pause before it changes direction." Toshi sat there, gasping, shame flooding his chest. When the abbot finally approached, he he knelt beside him. "Toshi," he said gently, "why do you chase what cannot run?" The monk lowered his head. "Because I want to awaken, master." The abbot smiled. "Then awaken to this moment, the one you're trying so hard to escape." For the next week, Toshi was told not to work. He protested, but the abbot insisted. "You will practice stillness in the way you fear most, by doing nothing." At first, it was torture. He watched others sweeping, cooking, studying, while he sat beneath the same tree from sunrise to dusk. He counted the hours, resented the silence, and even envied the wind for moving when he could not. But as days passed, something began to shift. He noticed the rhythm of nature, the slow bending of bamboo in the breeze, the quiet patience of a snail crossing the stone path, the way sunlight warmed the same leaf a little differently each hour. He realized that everything in nature was working, yet nothing seemed to be trying. One afternoon, the abbot brought him a bowl of tea and sat beside him. "Tell me what you see," he said. Toshi hesitated. "Everything moves," he said finally, "but nothing struggles." The abbot nodded. "That is the balance. Effort without tension, surrender without laziness." He poured the tea slowly, and the rising steam curled between them like a living thought. "Do you know," the abbot said, "that water and fire never fight? They simply express themselves. The river flows, the flame rises, both fulfill their nature. You too must learn to flow and rise in the same breath." That evening, Toshi returned to the meditation hall. He bowed deeply, sat down, and breathed, but this time he didn't try to silence the mind or chase clarity. He let each breath come as it wished. When thoughts drifted in, he didn't resist them. When silence returned, he didn't cling to it. A deep calm filled his chest. He realized he had never truly been meditating before. He had only been struggling to succeed. He whispered, "This is enough." The next morning, he resumed his chores. But his movements had changed. He no longer rushed to finish. He moved with quiet ease. When he swept, he let the broom glide like a brush over paper. When he carried water, he matched his steps to the bowl's sway. When he bowed, it was not to prove humility, but to rest in it. Other monks noticed the change. He seemed lighter, almost transparent, as if his effort had become music instead of labor. Weeks later, during evening meditation, a young novice sat beside him and whispered, "Brother, how did you learn to meditate so calmly? I always fall asleep or grow restless." Toshi smiled. "You're trying to control what should be shared. Let the breath breathe you." The novice frowned. "But how can I do that?" "By not doing," Toshi said, "by trusting the same force that moves clouds, rivers, and your heartbeat. You are not separate from it." The novice nodded slowly, though his brow stayed furrowed. Toshi chuckled. "You'll understand when you stop trying to understand." That night, Toshi sat beneath the same tree where he had once resented stillness. The moon hung above the temple, pale and bright. He thought about all the times he had forced himself forward, only to realize the path had been carrying him the whole time. He whispered, "To walk well is to walk with the wind, not against it." A cool breeze brushed his face. He smiled, bowed his head, and simply sat, alive, awake, unhurried. Pause here. Let your breath flow in and out without control. Notice that life continues whether or not you interfere. You don't need to push the river. It already knows where to go. Effort and ease are not enemies. They are the inhale and exhale of the same breath. True balance is not found between effort and rest, but in the harmony of both. When you work with life instead of against it, peace becomes effortless. Story 13, a meditation on the gift of silence, discovering wisdom that words cannot reach. The monastery on the northern ridge was known for its quiet. Its bell rang only once each day, just before sunrise. After that, the only sounds were wind, footsteps, and the distant cry of eagles. Among the monks, there was a man named Rio. He had come from a great city where he had been a scholar and teacher. He loved words, collecting them, perfecting them, using them to persuade and explain. When he joined the monastery, he brought his books with him. He believed that through study, he would uncover enlightenment itself. But after a few months, he found the silence unbearable. No one argued. No one lectured. Even meals were taken without speech, the only sound being chopsticks against wooden bowls. One morning, he approached the abbot and said, "Master, I feel my mind turning dull here. There is no discourse, no philosophy, no exchange of thought. How can wisdom grow without words?" The abbot smiled. Then today, you will meet the teacher who speaks without speaking." Rio frowned. "And who is that?" The abbot pointed to the mountains. "Go, listen to him." So Rio climbed. The trail was steep and narrow, twisting between cliffs. As he walked, the chatter of his mind kept him company. Theories, definitions, quotations. But as the air grew thinner, so did his thoughts. By the time he reached the summit, the world was vast and quiet. The valley below stretched out like an ocean of mist. He sat down on a flat stone and waited for the teacher his master had promised. Minutes passed, then an hour. No one came. The only sound was the wind passing through the grass. Frustrated, Rio shouted into the emptiness, "Is this the lesson? That I've wasted my time?" His voice echoed across the cliffs, once, twice, then faded completely. And in that fading, something shifted. He noticed the silence that followed. Not empty, but full, like the pause between two heartbeats. For the first time in his life, he wasn't waiting to speak. He was listening to what could never be said. The sun began to set. Rio watched light move across the rocks, shadows deepening, clouds glowing red and gold. He felt his thoughts slow dissolve. A strange peace filled him, soft, wordless, complete. When night came, he descended the mountain without hurry. The sound of his own footsteps became the only prayer he needed. Back at the monastery, the abbot was sweeping the courtyard. Rio bowed deeply. "Well," the abbot asked, "what did the mountains say?" Rio smiled faintly. "Nothing." "Ah," said the abbot. "And did you understand?" Rio nodded. "Yes." The abbot laughed softly. "Then you have heard more than any book could teach." From that day forward, Rio changed. He still read, but no longer to fill his mind, only to remind himself of the silence between words. When he taught novices, he spoke slowly, leaving long pauses between sentences. At first, they thought he had forgotten his place, but soon they began to listen differently, not to the words, but to the spaces that held them. One novice once asked, "Master Rio, why do you pause so long when you speak?" He smiled. Because wisdom needs space to breathe. When I rush, I hear only myself. Years later, a visitor from the city came to the monastery. He had been a fellow scholar from Rio's past life. They sat together in the garden, sipping tea. The visitor said, "You used to be the most talkative man I knew. Have you truly given up the art of debate?" Rio smiled. "Not given up, outgrown. Debate asks who is right. Silence asks what is true." The visitor frowned. "But how can you learn without questioning?" Rio looked at the lotus pond before them. The flowers floated quietly on the water, their petals untouched by mud. "Every morning," he said, "the pond asks nothing, yet it reflects the sky perfectly. That is the lesson words often drown." Later that night, Rio went to the meditation hall. The moonlight poured through the open doors, falling across the wooden floor like silver water. He sat and listened to the creak of the old beams, the faint hiss of wind outside, the beating of his own heart. In that sound, he heard everything he had ever sought to understand: birth and death, joy and sorrow, all woven into one great, breathing silence. He smiled and whispered, "Thank you, teacher." And in the quiet that followed, the world answered. Pause here. Let your own breath become still, quiet, and effortless. Notice the silence that waits beneath every sound you hear, the silence that never leaves. Silence is not the absence of meaning. It is the place where meaning rests. When you stop speaking, the world finally begins to. Silence is the truest language of wisdom. When you learn to listen without words, you begin to understand everything. Story 14, a meditation on the gentle strength of compassion. How kindness softens even the hardest hearts. In a remote province stood a weathered temple, surrounded by rice fields and tall grass that whispered with every breeze. Travelers often came seeking shelter, but one morning, the monks awoke to find a thief lying unconscious by the gate. He was thin, his hands rough, his face shadowed with exhaustion. Next to him lay a torn cloth bag. Inside it, a handful of stolen rice. The youngest monk gasped, "Master, he tried to steal from us." The abbot, an old man named Kiro, simply said, "Then he must be hungry." He turned to the novices. "Bring him food and water. When he wakes, feed him before asking why he came." The monks hesitated but obeyed. By afternoon, the thief awoke. When he saw monks gathered around him, shame filled his eyes. He tried to rise, but weakness held him down. The abbot knelt beside him. "You came to take food. You have found food. Eat." The thief stared. "Aren't you angry?" Kiro smiled faintly. "Anger wastes energy. Better to use that energy for compassion." The man hesitated, then began to eat. Each bite seemed to loosen something inside him: guilt, pride, fear. When he finished, he bowed his head. "Why would you help a thief?" "Because suffering steals more than hunger ever could," Kiro said softly. That evening, the thief asked to stay the night. The abbot agreed and showed him to a small room near the garden. The man couldn't sleep. Outside, he heard the soft sound of monks chanting, steady, patient, like waves against rock. He thought, "I've taken all my life. These men give without question. Why?" When morning came, he left quietly before sunrise, leaving behind the empty bowl and a single coin, the only thing he owned. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, the same man returned, not to steal, but to bow before the abbot. "I have no right to come back," he said, "but I wish to repay what you gave me." Kiro looked at him with calm eyes. "You owe nothing. The moment you wish to repay, the debt vanished." The man shook his head. "I have lived by violence. It is hard to forget." The abbot nodded. "Then remember differently. Let every life you touch be what you could not give before." The man asked, "And if I fail?" Kiro smiled. "Then start again. Compassion doesn't keep score." The thief stayed for a season, helping with chores. He learned to sweep the courtyard, fetch water, and meditate in silence. At first, his movements were clumsy, his eyes restless. But over time, the temple's rhythms softened him, like water smoothing stone. One day, while carrying water from the well, he saw a young novice struggling with 2 heavy buckets. Without thinking, he took one from the boy's hands. The boy looked up in surprise. "Thank you." The man froze for a moment. No one had ever thanked him before. He smiled a little awkwardly. "It's nothing," but something deep inside him warmed, as if the sun had touched a place long frozen. That evening, the abbot found him sitting by the garden pond. "Do you know," Kiro said, "that compassion is the strongest force in the world?" The man laughed softly. "Stronger than swords?" "Much stronger," the abbot replied. "A sword cuts only once. Compassion reshapes the soul forever." He pointed at the pond's surface, rippling with moonlight. "Throw a pebble." The man did. They watched the circles expand outward, touching every corner of the water. "See," said Kiro, "that is compassion. Small acts ripple farther than you'll ever know." Months turned into years. The thief, now called Run, stayed on as a lame monk. He rarely spoke of his past, but everyone could see how he treated others, with patience, humility, and gentle humor. He became the one who noticed when someone was cold, who filled empty bowls before his own. When new travelers arrived at the temple, frightened or ashamed, it was Run who welcomed them first. He knew that look in their eyes, the same one he once carried. One day, a young soldier came to the temple seeking forgiveness. He had fought in battles, done things he could not forget. "I have blood on my hands," the soldier said. "Can peace live there?" Rin took the soldier's hands in his and said quietly, "Then let kindness be what washes them." The soldier looked at him with tears. "But how do you know it will work?" Rin smiled gently. "Because it worked for me. When the abbot grew old and ill, Rin sat by his side, tending to him through the long nights. One evening, the old man whispered, 'Do you see now why I fed thief?' Rin nodded. 'You were feeding what was still good in me.' Kiro smiled. 'No, I was feeding what was good in me. Compassion nourishes both giver and receiver.' He closed his eyes. 'Now you will feed others.' And as the abbot drifted into his final sleep, Rin wept, not from sorrow, but from gratitude. Years later, travelers who came to the temple spoke of a kind monk who gave food to everyone, even thieves. They never knew his story. They only knew the peace in his eyes, the strength in his stillness. Sometimes at sunset, he would sit by the pond, throw a pebble, and watch the ripples reach the edges, the quiet echo of his teacher's lesson. Pause here. Breathe slowly. Let your chest soften with the warmth of understanding. Compassion isn't weakness. It's the quiet courage to meet pain with gentleness. Even the hardest stone given time and water, becomes smooth. Compassion transforms both the giver and the receiver. It is the strength that softens, the courage that heals, and the kindness that endures. Story 15, a meditation on the beauty of simplicity, learning freedom in owning and needing less. At the foot of a great mountain lived an old monk named Daigo. His hut was small, barely the size of a single tatami mat. Inside, he kept a straw mat for sleeping, a clay bowl, and a robe that had been patched so many times it looked like a quilt of memories. Every morning, he swept the ground before his hut, lit a small fire, and boiled water for tea. That was all. He had no possessions to protect, no schedules to keep. And yet, anyone who passed by would say the same thing. Daigo's face looks lighter than the wind. One autumn day, a wealthy merchant climbed the mountain, seeking wisdom. He had heard stories of the monk who lived with nothing and seemed to lack nothing. When he reached the hut, Daigo was brewing tea over a small fire. The merchant bowed. "Master, I have come from far away. I own ships, land, and homes, yet I cannot sleep in peace. Please teach me the way to contentment." Daigo smiled and gestured for him to sit. "Tea first," he said. The merchant looked around the hut and frowned. "Is this all you have?" he asked. Daigo poured the tea carefully into 2 chipped cups. "Yes, and it's all I need." The merchant sipped and grimaced. "It's bitter." Daigo nodded. "Like life when you try to sweeten it with too much." The merchant raised an eyebrow. "You mean I should give up what I own?" Daigo smiled. "Not unless your possessions have begun owning you." That night, the merchant asked permission to stay. The monk offered a straw mat while he himself sat outside under the stars. In the middle of the night, the merchant woke to the sound of wind rattling the bamboo walls. Rain began to fall, and he felt a leak drip onto his face. He shivered, frustrated. How can this old man live like this? He opened the door to find Daigo sitting calmly in the rain, watching lightning over the valley. "Master," he cried, "why don't you fix your roof? You're getting soaked." Daigo turned to him, smiling. "The rain washes what dust remains on me. Tomorrow I'll be lighter." The merchant shook his head. "But comfort," Daigo interrupted softly. "Comfort is not the same as peace. You can sleep on silk and still dream of storms." In the morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight spilled across the valley, glistening on every blade of grass. Daigo brewed tea again, humming quietly. The merchant looked at him, calm, radiant, alive, and felt something stir. He asked, "Master, what gives you joy in such poverty?" Daigo pointed at the rising sun. "That." He pointed at the wind rustling the trees. "And that." He placed a hand over his heart. "And this." The merchant followed his gaze and for the first time noticed the world beyond his worries. The mist curling above the fields, the small bird pecking at wet earth, the rhythm of life that asked for nothing. He whispered, "I have so much, yet I've never really seen any of this." Daigo smiled. "You own too much noise to hear simplicity sing." Before leaving, the merchant took out a pouch of gold and placed it beside the monk. "Please accept this," he said, "for your kindness." Daigo looked at the gold, then at the man. "Thank you," he said, "but my wealth would only make you poorer." The merchant hesitated, then laughed softly. "Then what can I take from here?" "Only this," Daigo said, handing him his empty teacup. "Keep it with you." When you drink, remember, emptiness makes it useful. Years later, that merchant would still keep the cup. Whenever anxiety returned, he would hold it in his hands and whisper, "There is enough. There has always been enough." He never met Daigo again, but he often told travelers, "There was once a man who lived with nothing and gave me everything." Pause here. Take a breath. Look around you, at what you have, at what you don't. Feel which one actually gives you peace. Simplicity doesn't mean losing things. It means realizing that most of what you chase, you don't need to carry. The lighter you walk, the farther you go. Simplicity is not poverty. It is clarity, the freedom that comes when you stop confusing possession with peace. Story 16. A meditation on the lesson of the falling leaf. Embracing change without resistance or fear. Autumn had arrived in the northern valley. The temple's maple trees burned crimson and gold, their branches glowing against the gray sky. Leaves drifted to the ground in slow spirals, landing gently on the moss-covered stones. A young monk named Renji stood beneath one of those trees, watching the leaves fall. He frowned. "Master," he said, turning to the old monk beside him, "I don't understand why people call this beautiful. All I see is death." The old monk, named Tenzo, smiled faintly. "Then you are looking with your eyes, not your heart." Renji tilted his head. "What else is there to see?" Tenzo stooped to pick up a fallen leaf. Its edges were curled, its color deep and rich. He held it up to the light. Beauty does not live in what lasts. It lives in what passes and teaches us to love anyway. Renji sighed. "But when something ends, doesn't that mean it's lost?" Tenzo placed the leaf in his palm. "Tell me, where does this leaf go when it falls?" Renji looked down, to the ground, and after that, "It decays," he said. The old monk nodded. "And what grows from the soil it becomes." Renji hesitated. "New trees." Tenzo smiled. "Then what was lost?" That evening, Renji couldn't sleep. He sat by the temple pond, watching the moon reflected in the water, sometimes whole, sometimes broken by ripples. He realized that the reflection changed, but the moon never did. "Maybe that's what Master meant," he whispered. "Change isn't loss. It's movement." The next morning, the wind picked up. Leaves filled the air, swirling in golden storms. The monks raked them into piles, but Tenzo only sat watching, eyes soft, hands folded. Renji approached him again. "Master, should we not collect them before they blow away?" Tenzo smiled. "Why hurry their journey? They have served their time on a branch. Now they serve the wind." Days later, Renji was sent down the mountain to deliver supplies to a nearby village. The road was lined with trees shedding the last of their leaves. He passed farmers harvesting rice, children playing in piles of red and yellow, old men sitting by the roadside warming their hands. Everywhere he looked, life was both ending and beginning. He saw the same pattern in everything: the harvest, the laughter, the falling leaves, all part of the same rhythm. When he reached the village, a woman met him, tears in her eyes. Her father had died the night before. She asked Renji to perform a blessing for his spirit. He hesitated. He had never led such a ritual before. But then he remembered the leaf in his master's hand, falling, transforming, returning. He knelt by the man's bed, placed his palm on the still chest, and whispered, "May your roots feed what grows next." The woman looked at him, puzzled but comforted. He smiled gently and said, "Nothing that changes is truly gone." When Renji returned to the temple, winter had begun. Snow lay soft on the branches where leaves once burned. He found Tenzo sweeping the courtyard with slow, rhythmic strokes. "Master," he said, "I think I understand now. Change is not an ending. It's the universe breathing." Tenzo looked up and smiled. "And what have you learned from the breath?" Renji replied, "That even the exhale is sacred." The old monk chuckled. "Then you have begun to see." He gestured toward the bare branches. "When you are young, you fear what leaves you. When you are wise, you bow to it." That night, the snow began to fall again, quiet, endless, pure. Renji stood beneath the same maple tree and whispered, "Thank you for your lesson." He imagined the fallen leaves beneath the snow, slowly turning to soil, preparing for spring. He felt no sadness, only the stillness of trust. In the silence, the wind moved softly through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and cold air. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, feeling himself part of the same endless cycle. Rising, falling, returning. Pause here. Breathe in. Feel how even the breath you just took will soon change and pass. Breathe out. Feel how that too becomes part of something larger. Everything falls. Everything transforms. There's peace in allowing it to. Change is not the loss of what was. It is the continuation of what is. When you release your fear of endings, every falling leaf becomes a beginning. Sturai 17. A meditation on te refer aan te rood. Learning flexibility in te fase of obstacles. Tiere was een nare of gorge at te voet of te maintaan were a fleer refer aan eier rond. It sound a voetlijke soft fanting terauge te forest. Generations of monks had walked besiddet, drawing lessons from its endless movement. Ohne die, a Chang monk nam het hierutame toe te referen frustration. Hij had been assignet to leer a grijk meditation, bet none of te nufiges veld listen. Hij whisper het, seft het ontgegleid. Wen te abot voorrechtet hem, hier is predebeernet. Het deriv a smal stone into te refer ontmeteret. Vai tan things ever goed te waaie want. Te refer answeered in its own land geage, as te adaireis en boeteret fonteneis. Te abot opjoret keitlei behint hem. Chau siem to beargang wette te water, he said. Guru beweet keitlei. Voorgeef me, master. A vijf violet. A try so hard, bet pupil resist me. Obstacles riese I vrij weer. Te albut smilet. Ten perhaps jou seld wat so hoe water meets obstacles. He ponte to a large rook en te fainter of te tyrant. Tell me, wat happens when te refer meets the stone? Here he throws it his arms. It divides. It loses part of itself. Look closer, sight the albut. Hiru knelt. Te kierin split around the stone. Regoining of 5 meters dovenstream. Vadle achan. Te servate sparkleid vere it hotbroken aantehalet. It dusmet vechet te albut side. It bains. Hiru fruvnet. Bet isn't tat veaknis. Te albut soek geseat. Veaknes klings te vorm strengte vloers te rauwget. He lifted a small brands on plaghed it into water. Te tyrant carried it afwath, fisting, spinning, vrije. Belikke dat his side. If jou thand move te obstafle, move wit het. He leeft hieru alone by te refer. Hierdie sat tere voor huis. botsing de waterkeel aansift arein stoornis onderwits. Hij begon toen notitie dat every opstapelen van het rivier sand, afroek threating a enige miset. Without de stoornis, de rivier wild halve bien selend on stil. Herinnert dat de steeds weer not hindranvis, bitte verre rook sopping is deafing. Dat nacht, returne tot de hal aan begon de session gaan. Wenn ten fiches fitgetet, hij smileert aan adjested doen instead of stolding. Hij inviteert hem to breate witte hem, not voor hem. Te roem grave kalm. Hij feilt de samen pease tot le feit in terrifer. De pease of me vermeend without resistant. Weeks later, helft hij reinstaan. Terrifer swelled aan tenderet. Tjaring brands from trees. Hiru watchit from te bridge as te tiereen troaret. A faintain, it did not stop. It found nave partes, tharfing dieper van als droog te yard. He wijsberet, see if in falls is part of the fliff. When the storm flioret, he walkit to the gorge agaan. De large reek dat onverdifferde tierend had bien worn smooth. Were water had onverfrasset angerlei, it nog glided in selente. Het touwfet is stone. Het was twil, poedese bij eiers of serender. Het touwget, mij bete rood kleer net toe. Manai sees ons basset. Hier u grave older ant eventueel hij bekame te Albert himself. Hang monks wild komen to him wette te samen frustratione ontetaret. He alwans leidt hem to te refer. Ohne die, no fite side, master ferium to is soft. Peple walk o ferme. Hier handed him a peble. Teroof dis into te water. Te boit it. Te peble faneset beneate te surfafe witte a feit plop. Nov dalme, side you, dit te refer loose on nighting. Te nufike swek his head. No it cape fleeving. Den remember, hier is sight. Te one view flues tan op de fiatet. Tat e finning, hier u stoot bij te refer alone. Te moonlig het simmereed onte water. Het taal viel te eiers behint hem, ifferai failire. Ifrei fange, wassing terauge his memsrei lukke peble stembling duvenstream. He smilet aan wijsbered, tank chow, theather. Te refer aanswiered in its endless voite, taraing his words avai. Paise here, breate sloevlei, imagine jaur fallenges astones in our refer. Let jaur breate vloev around him. Not achines tem. Strength is not rigidity. It is the calm prover to keep moving no matter the obstacle. Flexibility is not surrender. It is wisdom. The understanding that live flows based when Joe stop trying to dump the tyrant. Story 18. A meditation on the lantern keeper. Finding light within yourself when the path grows dark. Long ago, in a coastal province where fog often covered the sea, there stood a small lighthouse at the edge of a cliff. It was tended by an old monk named Shun. Every night, he climbed the narrow stairs to light the great oil lamp that guided sailors through storms. No one ever saw him in the village, but every fisherman knew the glow of his lantern. They called him the Silent Guardian. One winter, a fierce storm struck. Winds tore roofs from homes. Waves crashed against the cliffs, and rain fell so hard it blurred the horizon. In the chaos, the lighthouse flame went out. At dawn, a group of villagers climbed to check on Shun. They found him sitting calmly beside the unlit lamp. "Master," one cried, "the ships are lost. Why haven't you relit the light?" Shun looked out over the gray sea and said softly, "The lamp's oil is gone, but there is another light I must tend first." They stared at him confused. "What light?" He tapped his chest. "This one." That night, alone again, Shun sat in darkness. The wind howled through the tower's cracks, shaking the shutters. He could barely hear his own breath. For years, he had relied on the great lamp, its steady glow, its purpose. Now, faced with shadow, he felt small, uncertain. He closed his eyes and whispered, "If I cannot see the way, may I become the way." He sat through the night, listening to the sea crashing, the tower groaning, his heart beating. Slowly, the sound of his own breathing became the flame he was missing, steady, alive, constant. When dawn returned, he descended the tower and walked to the village. He found the people repairing their boats, worried and weary. One fisherman said, "Without your light, we feared the sea would swallow us." Shun bowed. "Then fear taught you what the light could not." He began gathering driftwood, soaked though it was. The villagers watched as he worked in silence, drying each piece by the morning sun. By afternoon, he had enough to make fire again. He carried the bundle back to the tower, climbed the steps, and relit the lantern just as dusk fell. The flame rose bright, steady once more. When the villagers saw it, they cheered. But that night, Shun didn't stay by the lamp. He sat outside, facing the ocean, watching how its waves reflected the glow. A young boy who had followed him asked, "Master, how did you know the light would return?" Shun smiled. "Because light never leaves. It only hides until we remember how to see it." The boy looked puzzled. "Even inside darkness?" "Especially inside darkness," Shun said. He picked up a small lantern beside him, its flame faint but warm. "Do you see this fire?" The boy nodded. "It was born from friction. Struggle made it live. Without resistance, it would never burn." Years passed. Shun grew older, his hair turned silver, and his steps slowed. But he still lit the great lamp every night. Villagers would visit and leave small gifts, bread, tea, flowers, as thanks. One evening, as he climbed the stairs, his knees gave out. He fell, clutching the railing, his breath short. He whispered, "I am the keeper of light. I cannot stop now." But then he looked up through the open window. The sky was full of stars, bright and countless, stretching over the ocean. He smiled weakly. "Ah, the lantern has many keepers." He sat down, closed his eyes, and let the starlight fill the room. When the villagers came the next morning, they found the great lamp still burning, though its keeper had passed quietly beside it. The boy, now grown, climbed the tower and looked out across the sea. The fog had lifted. The horizon shone gold. He whispered, "Master, your light never went out." From that day forward, the villagers took turns tending the lamp, each saying the same vow: "I will keep the light, both here and here." And they would touch their chests as Shun had done. Pause here. Close your eyes. Feel the quiet warmth that lives behind your ribs. A small, steady light that has never left you. No darkness can swallow it. It may flicker, but it remains. That is your inner lantern, your awareness, your peace, your true home. Light is not something you find. It is something you remember. Even in your darkest hours, the flame within waits patiently for you to breathe upon again. Story 19. A meditation on the mountain and the mirror, discovering truth through humility and self-reflection. At the top of the eastern range stood a mountain called Ryushin, the heart of the dragon. Its slopes were covered in mist, and near its peak was a small shrine built entirely of stone. Every year, monks made the climb to pay respect to the mountain spirit said to dwell there, a spirit that reflected the soul of whoever came before it. A young monk named Ida had long dreamed of the pilgrimage. He had studied harder than anyone in the monastery, memorized every sutra, and believed himself ready for enlightenment. He often said, "When I reach Ryushin, I will finally see the truth." His teacher, Master Koan, smiled each time he said it. "One sees only what one is prepared to recognize," he told him. But Ida, confident, only bowed and replied, "Then I am ready." At the start of summer, Ida began the ascent. The trail was steep and silent, except for the cry of hawks circling above. He carried only a staff and a small mirror in his pack, a gift from his teacher. When he reached the shrine after 2 days, he was exhausted but proud. Inside the small stone chamber was a single pool of water fed by melting snow. The surface was perfectly still, clear as glass. He knelt before it and whispered, "Show me the truth." At first, he saw only his reflection, his face flushed, his eyes bright with pride. Then suddenly the image rippled. He saw himself standing before the abbot, receiving praise, admired by his peers, wise and calm. The vision filled him with warmth. "This," he said aloud, "is the proof of my progress." But as he leaned closer, the reflection darkened. His proud smile twisted. The water shimmered and showed him another scene. Himself scolding a novice, ignoring a beggar, turning away from a friend in need. His breath caught. He shouted, "No, that's not who I am." But the mountain gave no answer, only silence and the soft wind through the pines. He sat there for hours, staring into the pool. The images came and went, kindness and cruelty, wisdom and foolishness, shifting like clouds in the sky. Finally, he covered his face and whispered, "Who am I, then?" A voice behind him answered, "The one who asks." It was Master Koan. He had followed quietly, as he often did when students made their pilgrimage. Ida bowed low. "Master, the mountain mocks me. It shows both my light and my darkness. How can that be truth?" Koan sat beside him. "Because truth has room for both." He picked up a small stone and dropped it into the water. The ripples spread, distorting their reflections, then settled again. "Look," he said. The water did not argue with the stone. It accepted it, then returned to stillness. Ida watched the ripples fade. His reflection grew calm again, no longer proud, no longer ashamed, just human. That night, they made camp near the summit. The moon rose full, silvering the snowfields. Koan said quietly, "When you came here, you wanted the mountain to confirm your greatness. But mountains are not teachers of pride. They teach perspective." He gestured toward the peaks, stretching endlessly in every direction. No matter how high you climb, there will always be another mountain. Humility is not lowering yourself. It's realizing how vast the sky truly is. Ida listened, tears welling. "Then what should I do, Master?" Koan smiled. "Stop trying to be pure. Start trying to be clear. A clear mind reflects everything. light, shadow, and truth alike. The next morning, Ida rose before dawn. The mist glowed pink with the first sunlight. He walked back to the pool and looked once more at his reflection. He bowed deeply. I see you now, not as a saint, not as a sinner, but as a student of the moment. He took out the mirror his master had given him and placed it beside the water. Then he whispered, "One shows my face, the other shows my heart. Both are needed." When they descended, Koan asked, "What did the mountain give you?" Ida smiled softly. "It gave me back everything I had ignored." Years later, when he himself became a teacher, Ida would lead new monks to the same mountain. They would ask for enlightenment, for visions, for miracles. He would hand each of them a mirror and say, "When you see yourself without judgment, the mountain will reveal itself within you." And when they asked what the mountain spirit truly looked like, he would answer, "Like whoever dares to look honestly." Pause here. Take a slow breath and imagine a still pool inside you, clear, deep, and quiet. Whatever appears on its surface, let it come. Don't reject it. Don't cling to it. Let it ripple, reflect, and settle again. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is seeing yourself without distortion. Truth is a mirror that reflects both shadow and light. Only humility allows you to look without turning away. Story 20, the final tale, the gate of no arrival. Walking beyond self into pure awareness. Dawn crept softly across the valley. Mist curled between the pines, and the temple bells echoed faintly through the air. An old monk named Shin walked along the forest path, leaning on his cane. His robes were frayed, his beard white as frost. He had spent his life studying the way, meditating, teaching, tending to others. Now at 80, his legs were weak and his breath short. He knew his time was nearing its end. Yet one question still lingered in his mind. What lies beyond arrival? He had reached many things in his life: discipline, wisdom, peace, but still, he felt something remained unseen. That morning, he decided to take one last walk to the old gate at the mountain's edge, the place where travelers would bow before leaving or entering the monastery. It was said that those who passed through it with a clear mind could glimpse freedom beyond birth and death. The path wound upward through silent bamboo. Each step was slow but deliberate. The world around him shimmered with dew, tiny jewels on every blade of grass. He felt the ground breathe beneath his feet, the mountain rising and falling with each step. At one bend, he met a young novice sweeping fallen leaves. The boy bowed. "Master Shin, where are you going?" Shin smiled. "To meet what I have followed all my life." The boy looked puzzled. "The Buddha?" Shin chuckled. "No, myself, before I began calling it me." He continued walking, the boy watching until the sound of his cane faded into the forest. When Shin reached the gate, the sun had begun to rise. The great wooden frame stood half buried in moss. It had no door, only space, an opening between two worn pillars. Beyond it, the mountain trail descended into mist. He stood before it for a long while, listening to the silence. Birds sang somewhere unseen. Wind brushed through his leaves. The world seemed to breathe with him, in and out one body. He whispered, "For 80 years, I've walked to reach this place. But perhaps I was never moving at all." He set his cane aside and stepped closer. As he crossed the threshold, a strange stillness filled him. Not the stillness of stopping, but of dissolving. He no longer felt the boundary between air and skin. The sound of wind became his breath. The scent of pine became his own thought. There was no longer Shin walking, only walking itself. The gate behind him disappeared into the fog. He smiled and whispered, "There is no arrival, because there was never departure." He walked until even the act of walking vanished. Later that day, when the novices went looking for him, they found his cane leaning against the gate. his robe folded neatly on a rock. There was no trace of his body, only the soft sound of wind moving through the trees. The abbot looked upon the scene and bowed deeply. He said, "He has gone nowhere, yet arrived everywhere." From that day on, the gate was known as the Gate of No Arrival. Travelers who passed through it would pause and whisper a small prayer. "May I remember that each step is both the journey and the home." Years passed. The bamboo grew taller, the path softened with moss. But the story of Master Shin endured. Monks told it not as a tale of death, but of awakening, the moment when the walker and the path became one. Novices would ask, "Did he die?" And the elders would smile and reply, "No, he simply stopped being two." Sometimes, when mist covered the mountain, monks claimed they could still hear a faint sound near the gate, a cane tapping softly on stone, then silence. Those who heard it said they felt an overwhelming peace, as if someone had reminded them that everything was already enough. Pause here. Let your breath flow naturally. Feel how each inhale arrives and departs in the same motion. There is no separation between coming and going, only the rhythm of life unfolding. When you walk, do not look for where it ends. Let each step complete itself. You're not on the way, you are the way. The journey and the destination are one. When you release the idea of arrival, you discover that you are home all along. The bell rings one last time. The sound moves through air, through you, through everything, fading yet never ending. You have walked far, from the bamboo grove of beginnings to the gate of no arrival, through compassion, patience, impermanence, and silence. Each story was a footprint in the same sand, one you've been walking since the moment you took your first breath. Do you see it now? Every monk, every leaf, every drop of rain, they were all you. The teacher, the student, the river, the mountain, all one breath wearing 1,000 shapes. You began seeking stillness, but stillness was never lost. It was waiting inside every pause between thoughts. You only needed to stop chasing it long enough to notice. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe in. Feel the air touch the inside of your body. Gentle, ancient. Exhale. Let the body melt into the floor, the chair, the ground. Now listen. There is a pulse beneath your heartbeat, the rhythm of the world itself. It moves through every stone, every wave, every soul that ever breathed. When you walk in awareness, that rhythm becomes yours. You don't need to reach enlightenment. You only need to remember that you were never separate from it. Think of the 20 lanterns you have lit through these stories. Taro, who walked without trying to arrive. Mei, who learned compassion through release. Ren, who found stillness in movement. Shin, who bowed to impermanence. Haru, who let go of control. Kai, who dropped the weight of expectation. Sora, who forgave himself. Ino, who saw the world with the heart, not the eyes. Rei, who thanked the sea. Kinto, who found beauty in brokenness. June, who trusted slow growth. Toshi, who discovered ease inside effort. Rio, who heard wisdom in silence. Rin the thief, who became compassion itself. Daigo, who lived richly with nothing. Rinji, who learned from the falling leaf. Hiro, who flowed like the river. Shun, the keeper of light. Aita, who saw truth in reflection. And old Shin, who stepped through the gate and vanished into the hole. Each was a mirror of the same teaching, that peace is not found by adding more, but by removing what blocks the view of what already is. Now breathe once more. Let the mind rest like a pond at dawn, still, reflective, unafraid. If thoughts appear, smile at them. If emotions rise, bow to them. Everything that comes is a guest. Everything that leaves is liberation. You may imagine yourself walking one last time through the temple garden. Morning mist rising, birds calling softly, dew on your skin. You step carefully, heel to toe, breath in sync with the world. There is no effort, no hurry, no destination. The earth accepts each step without judgment. And with each step, something heavy falls away. The need to prove, to control, to know, to arrive. By the time you reach the gate, there is nothing left to drop. Only awareness walking awareness. Pause here. Stay with the silence that remains. This silence is not empty. It is the breath of everything that ever was and ever will be. If you wish, repeat softly in your mind, I walk without arriving. I breathe without holding. I love without owning. I live as the path itself. Let those words dissolve back into the quiet. You have walked the full circle through patience, forgiveness, humility, and release back to where you began. The journey never ends because there was never distance between you and peace. Carry this stillness with you in crowded streets. Let your steps remember the temple path. In sorrow, remember the river that flows around every stone. In change, remember the falling leaf that feeds new life. In silence, remember that even breath is sacred. When the noise of life returns, and it will, close your eyes for one breath, and you will be back here. Because this place is not in the mountains or the temples. It's in you. Pause one last time. Breathe in deeply. Breathe out completely. Now open your eyes slowly. You have not reached the end of the path. You have only remembered that there was never one to begin with. Final reflection, moral of the journey. The art of walking meditation is the art of living awake. Release control, release fear, release the need to arrive. Walk gently, breathe fully, and know every step, every breath, every heartbeat is home.